Two massive armies are poised for war, but in the middle of the battlefield, the era's greatest warrior is paralyzed, dropping his weapons in despair. He is caught in a moral trap. To fight is to slaughter his own teachers and family members. To refuse is to ensure his own destruction and the fall of his cause. He concludes that in a scenario where every move leads to suffering, the most ethical path is to surrender entirely and live as a beggar. We recognize this paralysis. It is the wake of a decision where every possible path feels like a losing trade, making it feel safer to simply do nothing. This wall exists because the focus is fixed entirely on the potential fallout of the choice. To move forward, the warrior has to shift his attention away from the external outcome and toward the internal process. The response he receives challenges his initial logic. His mentor argues that his grief is misplaced because he is mourning the end of things that cannot actually die. This introduces Atman, the eternal, unchanging self. The physical body is described as a garment. Just as we change our clothes, the eternal self discards a worn-out body to take on a new form. This core identity remains untouched by external force. Weapons cannot cut it, fire cannot burn it, and water cannot wet it. Against this permanent baseline, the things we feel daily, heat, cold, joy, and sorrow, are temporary fluctuations. They appear and disappear, and the goal is to observe them with patience. When we view life on a timeline that has no beginning and no end, the localized crisis of the present moment changes scale. This macro perspective doesn't delete the pain, but it thins the emotional fog. It provides a foundation where the warrior can begin to look at his duty without being blinded by his fear of the immediate result. The conversation shifts from the infinite soul back to the immediate reality. The warrior has a specific social duty to uphold justice, and that duty hasn't vanished. Abandoning an obligation because of personal distress carries a heavy cost. In this culture, a warrior's reputation is his most valuable asset. Losing it through cowardice is described as a fate worse than death. Most of us operate on a simple feedback loop. We take an action specifically to get a reward. To act under pressure, we need a different system, nishkam karma, or desireless action. Under this rule, you have a right to the work itself, but you have no claim to the results of that work. The focus must stay entirely on the performance, not the prize. Obsessing over the finish line introduces anxiety. When we are preoccupied with winning or losing, that mental noise degrades the quality of the action we are performing right now. Stability is found by treating success and failure as equal. When the ego is no longer tied to the outcome, the mind is free to execute the task with total concentration. What does a person who has actually mastered this mindset look like in practice? This is the Sthitaprajna, the person of steady wisdom. They have developed a specific relationship with their senses, learning to observe inputs without being governed by them. They can retract their attention from worldly distractions at will, much like a tortoise pulling its limbs into a shell to protect its core. Without control, the mind follows a downward path. Dwelling on desire leads to attachment and anger, destroying reason. Conversely, a disciplined mind is like the ocean. Endless rivers of chaos pour in, yet its baseline remains perfectly undisturbed. Relocating to a quiet forest or a temple doesn't provide peace if the internal noise of desire remains. By decoupling our sense of self from the results of our choices, we build an internal architecture that stays stable. This allows us to exist right at the center of the chaos and act with an undisturbed focus.